And that frequency band is going out. It's represented in our auric field. And so we're drawing in people, places, ways of life and experiences which relate to the frequencies we're putting out. So if you bring this to the big picture, we are living within an energetic sea.
This is Luke Radowski of WeAreChange.org here with the one and only David Icke. Last year we had a very interesting conversation. It kind of went viral on the internet where we talked about ayahuasca and DMT and the secrets of the universe. So I think it's only fair to kind of continue that conversation. And I was wondering, David...
oh, by the way, the last conversation was on a dirty wooden bench in this horrible little area, wasn't it? In Watford.
This scenery here.
This is a slight improvement, right?
A great improvement that David has taken us out here to the Isle of Wight, and it's been amazing and beautiful. The weather's also great, which is very rare here for London. But spiritually speaking, you know, we all go on different paths. Since we last spoke, how is your path? What path are you on now?
Well, I'm doing, Luke, what I've always done, which is follow my intuition and just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and where it goes, it goes. You know, all you can do is have the intent to do what you want to do, the greatest good you think you can do, and trust that that intent will bring towards you what you need to do to make it happen. And you know, there are a lot of myths about spirituality that, you know, when you become spiritual, suddenly your life changes and you're walking down country lanes with, you know, butterflies flutting around your head and beautiful colors, and, you know, life's wonderful now because I'm spiritual. But actually, one of the things that I was told through a psychic when in 1990, right at the start of my conscious start of this journey, was the spiritual road is tough and no one makes it easy. Yeah. And so there is another myth that the awakening means that your life becomes perfect in your view of perfect. But actually what awakening means is tearing down the layers of programming and perception that hold you in servitude to ignorance. And so there are many times in my life, and they continue, and I'm sure you've absolutely been through the same, where you have challenges and you think, well, what the hell is this all about? But if you look deeper into it, even though it's an experience you might not like, there's a gift waiting once the penny drops. Because I saw a quote today, funnily enough, about your greatest teacher is your last mistake. And so what we call mistakes are just experiences that give us insight, which without experiencing it, we wouldn't get the insight. So, you know, you become a bit blasé about it in the end, because you've been on the journey for so long, and it's like, you know, you're going, well, then there's a problem, you've learned from the problem, you go higher. And that's what I've always done, and that's what I'm doing now. And where it goes is where it will go.
Just like Bill Hicks said, life is just a ride. It's an up and down kind of interesting roller coaster. But personally, one thing I learned from last year is gratitude. And being grateful for what you have every day now. Before I go to sleep, I write down 5 things I'm grateful for, and really putting out the intention of just being happy with what you already have. And if you think about that, it kind of brings in more of that into your life as well. It's a very interesting kind of understanding, interesting kind of paradox. But I know intentions and putting your thoughts to something is extremely, extremely important. We know that it could be used for dark and light. But what is your understanding of the power of intention?
Well, first of all, there's another quote. If you're not happy with what you've got, you won't be happy with what you want. or if you're not content with what you have, you won't be content with what you want, because it is a state of being. You get these people who get up with the sun every morning to earn more and more money, and by the end of the day they earn more and more money, but they're no happier and no more content. I mean, so it's very true. Intent, I think, is an extraordinarily powerful energy, and actually it comes back to what I was just saying earlier. If you put out an intent, I want to do this, well, what will happen is, because that intent is a frequency, everything is a frequency, that intent has its own frequency, whatever intent it is. And so other frequencies that sync with it will start attaching to it. And we call these frequencies, these energy fields, people, places, ways of life, experiences, etc. And so when you put out an intent and say, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to achieve, well, what will come back is what you need to achieve it. And we're coming back here to, there'll be fluttering butterflies as I walk down country lanes of beautiful colours, because what comes back when you say that is what you need to achieve the intent. And almost every time, what is needed to achieve any intent of greater awareness is deprogramming programmed awareness. And so what comes towards you is often your worst nightmare sometimes. Anyway, and people who are pains in the backside, people that disrupt your life, bring about upheavals and stuff like that. And if you see it in that one-dimensional sense of the experience, you start feeling sorry for yourself. Look, I just want to be spiritual, and I want to do some good, and my life's falling apart. What's going on? Well, what's going on is what you need to get the insight you want. You are having the onion skins removed that are keeping you from that understanding, because it's not a case of seeking enlightenment. We are enlightened. That's what we are. We are all that is, has been, and ever can be. But what the awakening path is removing all those layers of programming and perception control that are keeping us from that level of ourselves, which is enlightened. Mm-hmm. And what experience does, I mean, wise people take experience and learn from it. Foolish people take experience, don't learn from it, and so keep repeating the same things. What's that line? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And so I think people kind of need to cut the crap about spirituality as if suddenly... I see this lot, Luke, in the New Age. And the New Age, some very nice people in the New Age, but it is a massive form of escapism. I meet so many people in the New Age, or have over the years, not so much now, that are using it as a form of escape. So they live this life in which outwardly they are portraying themselves as enlightened and happy and joyous and oh, everything's wonderful because I'm spiritual now. But inside, they're full of crap. Yep. And it comes to the surface eventually. And until that crap, and it's not kind of condemning everybody, everyone's full of crap because we're in a madhouse. And we've been programmed by a madhouse since we were born here. So, it's not condemnation, it's just facing facts. And until you recognize the crap and remove it, then you'll stay full of crap. And that's what intent does. You put the intent out. Okay, if you can't achieve your intent while you're full of crap, here's some experiences to get rid of the crap. And you get these people come in your life. You're horrible. Why are you doing that to me? And at the end of it, are you more enlightened? Well, yeah, I am. Yeah, I've learned a lot from that. Well, that was the idea. That's how it works. But we judge every experience in and of itself. When, I look, and I'm sure you'll do the same. And I'm sure everyone listening to this will do the same. When you look back at what gave you the most in terms of wisdom, expanded awareness, it was something in the moment of experiencing it you didn't like.
Very much so. A lot of growth for myself came from a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of loss with either my health or personal relationships. And I like how you broke it down, because there is this perception of spirituality as this hippy-dippy kind of culture where people just think positively and everything positively happens and everything's happy-go-lucky, when in reality it's about facing your fears, facing your ego, facing your pride, and finding a truest version of yourself where you could really act freely, and I think that's a very important distinction, because it's not all hippy dippy. No. But I think a lot of it also has to do with certain frequencies, certain kind of thoughts and patterns that we put out there as well. There was very interesting scientific experiments done on plants. For an example, a piece of lettuce was cut by a specific scientist, and they measured the frequencies, and it was suffering frequencies, it was pain suffering, and all living things have these frequencies. And I think understanding this kind of realm is very important, because these elites, these powerful men, I feel, have grasped it in a certain way. They have certain rituals, they have their intentions that they put out there. Meanwhile, we talk about it, we're deemed crazy and insane and delusional. Meanwhile, the mainstream media, who pegs us as this, doesn't even talk about the politicians who are actually doing this, like in the Bohemian Grove, wearing robes, doing sacrifices, and doing all these insane rituals. So my question leading to this is the importance of frequencies and understanding them. What's your grasp on frequencies?
Well, for me, frequency in the end, frequency is everything, because everything is a frequency. This conversation is a frequency. I mean, and if we were laying into each other, the conversation would be a different frequency. Everything's a frequency, and frequencies attract frequencies. I call it vibrational magnetism, and therefore, what you put out comes back. So when you put out the intent, whatever that intent is, it's represented as a frequency, and it draws in frequencies that relate to it. And so we, at any point in our lives, depending on our state of being, our attitudes, our emotional state, whatever it is, our intent, we are vibrating to particular frequencies, particular frequency band. And that frequency band is going out. It's represented in our auric field. And so we're drawing in people, places, ways of life and experiences which relate to the frequencies we're putting out. So if you bring this to the big picture, we are living within an energetic sea. This can, you can photograph it now. It's, you call it the Earth's energy field, whatever you like. There is not empty space between everything. They are different expressions of an energetic sea. And if you want to affect all the fish at the same time, you affect the sea. If you want to affect all human beings at the same time, you affect the energy sea. Now, when you think that the technological radiation in our energy sea has increased by millions of times in the last 50 years, this energetic sea that we are speaking in now is dramatically different to what we would have been speaking into 50 years ago. And so that's fundamental for this reason. Our energetic fields, what we call people, interact with this energetic sea. And therefore it's affecting us, and it's affecting our state of being. And our state of being then changes to different frequencies. We attract to us like frequencies to what we're putting out. So it is actually not just about manipulating an energetic Earth energy field. It's about manipulating everything within it by what you do to that. And I came across a document a few years ago, written, it was said by a leading Australian Satanist, as he knew he was dying, And it wasn't like an admission of, oh, I'm just saying I'm terrible. I'm so sad that I did it. No, he was actually glorifying it in many ways, but he was explaining how it worked. And we talked about the children and politicians and all the stuff. But one of the things he said is that they go to particular points within this energetic sea, and a lot of these points are pointed out really by stone circles, standing stones, ancient earthworks, often churches, because churches were built on, many churches were built on old pagan ritual sites, and thus the church is on one of these vortexes within the energetic sea. And he explained how they do rituals at those points repetitively. And as they do them and do them and do them and do them, it changes the nature of the energetic field. It pulls down its frequency. Now, I've been saying for a long, long time that this world is ultimately manipulated by entities that operate beyond human sight. Christians call them demons. The Islamic and pre-Islamic world, where it came from, call them jinn. There's many names from around the world. The Gnostics, the ancient Gnostics, called them archons. And it makes me smile, Luke, when Christians kind of condemn me for talking about this stuff, and he talks about reptilians, he's mad, he talks about entities. So what about these demons in your Bible then? What are they all about? It's written in the books, and these entities are all over the ancient world. You see them described in almost exactly the same way, often exactly the same way, using different names, and they operate in a certain frequency band, and basically, it's a frequency band that is a distortion. It's a bit like a computer virus. You might want to use that analogy. And this force is of itself a distortion. And so, what they have to do to have control over the target population is to pull the target population into the distortion. And if you look at the world, it's not only a distortion, it's a distortion to the point where it's virtually everything's an inversion. Everything's inverted. And so you've got the natural order. The natural order of balance is love, kindness, caring for each other. The inversion of that is war, conflict, people dying of hunger in a world of plenty. These are all inversions of the natural order. And so society has been manipulated and continues to be so, not least by infusing the energetic sea with the distortion to pull people into a distorted state. And if you don't understand this, then the distortion completely controls your perception. For instance, all around the world, particularly in America at the moment, but it's coming in many other places, we're having the clearly unfolding police state. We're having YouTube is awash with police brutality, not least out of America. And we're getting more and more imposition by uniforms. Now that's the distortion. It's not the natural order for that to happen, for people to be brutal to each other. That's a distortion. They're expressions of the distortion. But if you then think, well, the only way that we can react against that is by stockpiling weapons and using them if necessary, then you're just another expression of the distortion, because that's not part of the natural order either. Killing is not part of the natural order. Making people suffer, maiming people, it's not part of the natural order. It's a distortion of the natural order. And whether you're fighting for peace or fighting for fascism, it's still part of the distortion. I have this phrase I've used for years: what you fight, you become. And what do you become when you fight? You become an expression of the distortion. And because people who think they're awake are so programmed by the perception of the world that they can see, which is just a tiny band of frequency, the enormity of forever exists beyond that tiny frequency band, and yet from that little sliver of frequency, people think that they can know it all. And if you only see the physical, then the only thing you can think of in terms of meeting what you perceive as a physical situation is with another physical situation. So if we're going to get out of this, we need to understand that it's about frequency, and it's about manipulating human perception, thus human states of frequency, so that we sync with the distortion, and then the distortion's calling the shots. It's like tuning a computer into the internet. It's now feeding you information from which you get your perceptions, your reflex action responses about everything. And when you are working to get closer to the natural order of balance, of love, of caring, of seeking what's best for the greater good and not just for the perceived success or benefit of you, then you start to move out of the distortion because you're no longer syncing with it in terms of frequency. And at that point, the distortion stops influencing your perceptions. And as it stops influencing your perceptions of everything, it allows space for other perceptions to come in, for other insight to come in, because you're now connecting with something that's beyond the distortion. And that's the point where you get insight. It's when you get revelation of how things are. And of course, at that point, everyone attached to the distortion says you're mad and crazy and insane, because insanity has become, because of the distortion, insanity has become the norm. Insanity is perceived as normal. And therefore, if the world doesn't see you as strange, crazy and insane, then you need to ask why. Because it should. I'm delighted when I'm called mad. I think, thank you very much for confirming my sanity.
And many people have actually, when they use DMT, they actually say that this